Hi everyone, welcome to a special July installment of Poems That Changed Me. Not that there's anything special about July, but that this particular installment of Poems That Changed Me is going to go in a slightly different direction. Today we're focusing on the macro rather than the micro. Instead of talking about one poem that was particularly transformative for me, I want to talk instead about 4 poems, or one dual-facing page of an anthology, a time that was utterly transformative for me. I was a sophomore in college. I think I was a recently converted English major. I'd switched over from journalism. And the assignment for this particular class was to take our poetry anthology and just read through the anthology and see if any poems jumped out at us. I, being a dutiful student, took my anthology with me to lunch that day, and I'm sitting in the dining hall, probably eating some overcooked green beans and mystery meat, and I open my Diani Modern American Poets, Their Voices and Visions anthology. I just open it up to the page that you see below you. It's W.S. Merwin on the left, James Wright on the right. I'd never heard of Merwin, had never heard of Wright, knew nothing about them or their poetry. I wasn't a particularly skilled reader of poetry. I hadn't read a whole lot. I mean, my idea of poetry was probably Robert Frost. I'd read a lot of T.S. Eliot and Wallace Stevens. But I came across Merwin and Wright, and I still remember that sensation of sitting in the dining hall and reading these poems and just not knowing what was happening. I felt like the entire room was receding, just going away from me, and I was just surrounded in a cone of silence, just these poems and me. And I've thought over the years, what about these poems was so transformative, and if I had encountered Merwin and, say, Frank O'Hara, or Anne Sexton and James Wright, if it would have had such an effect. I feel like Merwin and Wright's poems talk to each other really well. Both are influenced by Latin American surrealism. Both had translated Pablo Neruda. James Wright had translated Cesar Vallejo, and James Wright was really influenced by Georg Trakl, who would become super important to me. Both poets are considered part of not really a movement, more of a style called the deep image poets, along with Robert Bly, maybe, Galloway Connell, maybe, Mark Strand. This kind of surrealist image, these images that are more associative and sort of freely associative, and they don't really make much logical sense, but work in a sort of surreal, subconscious way. I found that these poems, maybe because they were short, they were written in very plain English, especially the James Wright. The Merwin lacked punctuation. The James Wright seemed like they were both participating in myth, but I knew that I was in the presence of language that was simultaneously approachable and otherworldly. I think all 4 of these poems are really sort of toe the line between the literal and the magical. And the James Wright poem, "When the droppings of last year's horses blaze up into golden stones," I still remember reading that, and I'm like, wow, he's changed shit into gold. That's kind of like what he's doing to language. And then the Merwin, this is the time of the year when the beards of the dead get their growth. And then my words are a garment of what I shall never be, like the tuck sleeve of a one-armed boy. Those, and the jewel, I don't remember the line exactly. When I stand upright in the wind, my bones turn to dark emeralds. Those notion of transformation, of the ordinary into the extraordinary, that time of the year when the beards of the dead get their growth, this sort of presence of absence, the transformation into an image of some kind of lack, right? I've wasted my life. Your absence has gone through me like thread through a needle, right? These things that are missing something. So I loved everything that was happening in these poems. And so I actually went to the library. We didn't have Google then. And I researched Merwin and Wright. And that led me through both poets to Pablo Neruda. That was a game changer. James Wright led me to Robert Bly, and that led me to Bly's translations of Rilke, very big game changer. And James Wright's translation of Cesar Vallejo and Georg Trakl, unbelievable game changers for me. Finding Georg Trakl changed my life in a number of ways. In fact, after my MA, I moved to Salzburg, Austria, and my plan was to study in the Georg Trakl Gedenkstätte and translate all of his poems. That's how big of an impact he made. And that all started by coming across these poems in that book. I still love Wright and Merwin to this day. I've actually written about both. They have been super important to me, and I still go back to them, even though some of their poems can seem a little dated. Wright, especially to me, can feel a little sentimental. Merwin, less so. But I still, when I look at this page, remember how transformative these poems were for me. They absolutely changed my life. It makes me feel like I have not yet wasted it.